ensayas rápido, no te sabes poner pie. Lo ensayas rápido, no te sabes poner pie.
Welcome back to Civil Discourse Now. I'm Mark Small.
And I'm Paul Ogden.
This is the second segment on December 29, 2012 with a whole bunch of snow.
Shooting from an undisclosed location.
Yeah, undisclosed.
A secure undisclosed location.
And next week we will be live on Indiana Talks.
Yes, 365 Live.
365 Live, so you can see us then, and also you can listen to us on the audio, because that will be an MP3 medium audio, I guess. So people can hear us live and call in. We'll have a phone number by then, probably on Magic Jack. So, Matt, we're talking about people who died in 2012. People know, Matt, you...
There's two that I wanted to talk about. Jeff kind of touched on a couple of the musical deaths. I want to go in a bit different direction. This guy this guy wasn't a musician himself, but he had an important impact on music. Dick Clark, host of American Bandstand, longtime host of New Year's Rockin' Eve, and I was never a fan of New Year's Rockin' Eve. I personally don't like a lot of the music that they put on, but I think American Bandstand really brought a lot of music to the mainstream that otherwise wouldn't be accessible and accepted by Americans. You know, a lot of rock started there. A lot of early, even as the show went on, rap and stuff like that. So I think that's an important death to especially among. I think as far as rock musicians, there was a lot of important deaths.
I was a kid when his show was on, and that was a big thing to see somebody come on and they were mouthing the lyrics of the song.
Oh yeah, it was lip syncing. It's kind of like an early predecessor to the music video of some types.
Yeah.
And I think, and of course the music videos kind of faded away into obscurity now, but for decades that was a huge influence, and anybody who had success due to music videos such as Devo or Michael Jackson, owes Dick Clark a favor.
Who's the second?
Second is Spider-Man. Marvel Comics has Marvel Comics has this uncanny ability to release their most horrible comics at the very end of the year. And this year they released Amazing Spider-Man 700, which ends the Amazing Spider-Man as a long-running series. The only other series of comics they have running longer than that is Fantastic Four, which was published the first issue, which was published right before the Amazing Spider-Man started. In Amazing Spider-Man 700, and the story arc is Dr. Octopus is, due to 40 plus years in real time of being beaten to death by superheroes, he's just an ordinary man with mechanical arms. He has decided to make a last-ditch effort and mind swap his brain into Spider-Man's and Spider-Man's into his dying body. And Doc Ock does it. He is now Dr. Octopus, except he has Spider-Man's body and memories and abilities and all that fun stuff. And he put Peter Parker into his dying old man crippling body. And the Amazing Spider-Man ends with Spidey beating to death Peter Parker in front of his friends and family, and then claims, "I will be a better Spider-Man than you ever were," while he's standing over his dead body that he just murdered in front of his friends and family. Thank you, Marvel Comics, for ruining Spider-Man. I'm sure, to the non-comic book nerds like everyone else in this room who's not me, comics, everything eventually reverts back.
I owned a first edition of the first Fantastic Four comic book. I owned first editions of those, and my mother threw them out when I was 12 years old because she thought they were childish.
My dad has the same story with he collected Daredevil, and his brother collected a Spider-Man. And one night when him and his brother were fighting, their father just decided to throw them all in the garbage because they were just being too much of an annoyance. But thank you, Marvel, for ruining comics, for ruining Spider-Man, and now whenever I see Spider-Man in the Avengers, which he's a member of and stuff like that, I will be seeing Dr. Octopus being a dick to everybody.
That's like MASH.
That's great.
The ratings for MASH shows that have Henry Blake are hurt because everybody knows Henry Blake's character.
And I'm not too worried because in 2 years when the new Spider-Man film comes out, they will, of course, revert the storyline. But in the meantime, I'm going to have to read 2 years' worth of Doc Ock comics being a dick to everybody. And I can't really... See, the thing about villains can't star a comic because you can't root for a villain. It's really hard to do that.
Why not? I rooted for Darth Vader. A lot of us rooted for Darth Vader.
We need to get this in.
Wow.
The three I would pick. Well, first of all, Andy Griffith. Big Andy Griffith fan growing up. Sat around and watched it when I was growing up. The other two also relate to my childhood. Big space program was big in my childhood. Neil Armstrong, the first person to walk on the moon. And most of the people who walked on the moon are now dead, or they will be dead probably shortly. And then Sally Ride, first female astronaut that we had, so also passed away this year. Those are my three.
My three are Dan Roundfield, who was a player for the Atlanta Hawks, and I would never have even remembered him or talked about him, except I read an Atlanta player who was a really great Atlanta player.
Dominic Wilkins?
Yeah, Dominic Wilkins. Talked about him as being a really important... he died at the age of 59 this year, saving his wife when they were on vacation in Aruba. And he dove into the waves to pull her out at risk to himself because it was a riptide, saved her, but he died in the meantime. And I thought that was... and he talked about what a great guy he was all the way around. A second person was Davy Jones, going back to my childhood when I was lead singer for the Renegades, which was a short-lived band that we had our own cult following. But I'd come home at night and watch the Monkees to see what their latest song was.
Davy Jones died.
Yeah, and he died this year, and they were a real big musical influence. At one point, they were bigger sellers than the Beatles.
And they started as just a TV show. I think it was only the bass player actually knew how to play an instrument, and they due to the popularity they learned.
No, it's the lead guitarist.
Oh, the lead guitarist.
Yeah, Peter Tork knew how to play. And actually, Michael Nesmith knew how to play, and he wasn't just like the bass player; he was a musician. But Mickey Dolenz, who played the drums, he was a child actor, and Davy Jones kind of knew how to sing. But what do you have to do to sing? You just do your voice. But that was the thing. The show started out. Stephen Stills tried out for that show and got rejected to be one of the Monkees. What would have happened to Crosby, Stills, Nash? Mm-hmm. You know, it would have been Crosby,
Nash.
Jones, Nash, or Crosby, Tork,
oh no,
Nash.
Crosby Stills without Nash, but with Young. That would be horrible.
Third person was, and I know Paul will really hate this, and Jeff will too, Gore Vidal. He was an intellectual giant on the left. Shot down William F. Buckley during the 1968 Democratic National Convention. But aside from that...
Is that the convention where, like, the Chicago mayor had everyone, like, beaten who was protesting outside?
Yes, it was called a police riot by the Walker Commission later. But the...
so the bad thing about the people who will just see this on radio, they didn't see Jeff and I grimacing when he talked about how he shot down William Buckley.
Ogden and Cox grimace?
Yes.
Okay.
Put that in the record.
But Vidal also wrote an excellent series of books, and it's an irony that Lincoln came out this year as a big hit movie when Vidal's book, Lincoln, is much better in terms of the historical accuracy of Lincoln's presidency, and he has a series of books that goes from Lincoln's presidency all the way up through the early 20th century. So we lost a really great guy then, and I've got an excellent Gore Vidal story. A person I knew in Chicago was a friend with, he knew these gay ex-priests, and one was going over to Italy, and he said you had to know this guy to realize how serious he was about everything. If you told a joke and everybody else was laughing, he'd say, "Why did you find that funny?" And he said, so he writes over to Italy, he's visiting a friend who lives in the same village as Gore Vidal. And so he says, I've arranged for us to have lunch with Vidal. And so he's going over and he said, Martin is looking forward to having lunch with Gore Vidal, this intellectual giant, and he's going to challenge him with all these questions. So they go to the villa, he's shown out on the deck, He's sitting there, and he's just firing all these questions at Vidal, who's just kind of like sloughing him off. And finally the guy goes, "But I ask you this, Mr. Vidal, where is your youth?" And Vidal said, "That's easy. He's down in the village buying bread for our lunch." So I thought that was a great Vidal story.
That is really.
I guess you had to be
Okay,
there.
we have fulfilled our leftist social commentary for the week.
Yeah.
No, we haven't, but we'll do that for the. That's
Darth
enough for this
Vader was
segment.
cool.
But
All
the one guy, the one big death of the year, the number
Right.
one for ratings was Osama bin Laden, who also had the largest stash of porn in that particular part of Afghanistan.
Does he really
Pakistan.
count as a person, though?
And we never did find out what kind of porn. Was it midget porn or
Midget
what?
porn. I don't.
I'm
know.
glad you're asking the serious, hard-hitting questions,
Yes,
Paul.
exactly.
I'm glad I'm sitting
On
next
top
to
of
you.
things, hey.
Well, that's typically more hard-hitting than anything you get out of the New York Times anymore.
Well, newspapers don't exist anymore, really. I mean, they do, but they don't sell
Wasn't,
ads.
wasn't Nate Silver's blog that had like 90% of the New York Times traffic or something? I read a statistic like that. Like 90% of the traffic was Nate Silver's blog.
But when you get down to it, Osama bin Laden was snuffed, and
And he was snuffed.
and he's gone. So
Hey, speaking of deaths, how about the death of the media? One of the deaths on that list was Andrew Breitbart, and regardless of what you
Yeah.
thought of his political
He was
views,
actually huge.
I think he contributed a lot to what most of us do, and what he never said bloggers. He never wanted to refer to these people anything other as citizen journalists, and I think he did a lot to get alternative media going. I don't, unlike some people, and I don't think blogs and new media are going to replace traditional media.
Well,
There are
Unless the
some things-
traditional media continue abusing their position
there are
like
some,
they do.
as far as journalism, there's certain things blogs can certainly help in, but I've never seen like television stations do much in the cultural aspect. You don't see them doing restaurant reviews. You don't see them covering concerts. You don't see them promoting.
That's all the
contests and
Indianapolis
stuff.
Star does.
Well, but also, but what about local stuff? I mean,
Yeah.
I look for local news in blogs.
Well, that's because Indianapolis doesn't have a newspaper anymore.
Well, most
And there's lots of
Some
towns
of the
that
TV
don't.
reporters do good stories.
Well, yeah, my dad.
There is a gap to
With
be filled,
exceptions.
but back to the main point. I think Andrew Breitbart really did a lot to help invigorate people to go out and pursue writing and some type of journalism, even if it isn't the traditional journalism that we know from years past.
Except one of his proteges, Dana Lash, is now suing him, or suing Breitbart.com.
Oh, she's no longer part of it? I
She's
thought
trying
she
to get out of the contract.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
There were several media figures who died who had multiple connections to the media. Larry Hagman, I Dream of Jeannie, Dallas Revisited, Richard Dawson, people don't remember.
Hogan's Heroes.
And Family
right.
Feud. And he was on
Game. Match Game.
Match Game.
Gene Rayburn.
Match Game 73.
I thought that was Gene Rayburn.
No, he was on the
No, he was
panel.
on Match. He was on
and
the panel.
and then Ben Gazzara was on a couple of TV series.
Charles Durning.
Charles Durning, Jack Klugman
Klugman.
was only on one TV series.
Odd Couple.
No, two, because he had Quincy, Emmy, and then he was also on The Odd Couple.
M.E.
Yeah, it was
Yeah, and,
medical examiner.
after
No, it's
Quincy.
still M.D. though, I think.
No, it was ME.
You think so?
Yeah, it was
I don't
ME.
think
Because
so.
I remember wondering
We'll
about
have
that
to
at
find
the
out
time.
that he and I are right.
All right,
But he did, and this is topical because he, after Quincy became lousy, when he became more of a crusader than an actual investigator, he did a show specifically on autism.
This is the end of the second segment. We'll be right back.